Good evening. This is the Wednesday, May 10th, 2023 meeting of the Finance Committee, Town of Paxton. Going to open the meeting. I look around. We have a quorum, so we will officially start. There's an agenda shown on the screen, which hopefully has been previously sent to everyone. Principal focus this evening is going to be item number 3, which is the budget, number 4, which are some warrant articles, number 5, which are some reserve fund transfers, and time permitting, which it may not be, would be a revisit of some things, perhaps to lay the groundwork for future meetings. With your permission, it's been suggested that we take the reserve fund transfers, so we take the agenda out of order. I think I had sent everybody an email saying you're not going to get an email with all kinds of downloads and all kinds of materials, that it would be essentially either at your place this evening or likewise on the screen that Jeremy is running for us this evening.
I don't have that. Is that attached to yours? You're going to send it? Okay.
So does anybody know any bird calls or something of that nature while the... We're grateful to have Jeremy and Heather doing their IT thing here, so thank you both. You're going to see in a minute there are going to be 8 transfers for a total of $32,839.28.
Wait.
Sorry, I didn't think about that one.
Probably take about a minute. I'm still waiting to get it.
Yeah, a long way to travel.
Well, just based on the last one, it's...
I think it would be difficult, if not profoundly boring, if I read the transfers to you. So if you can just bear with us, that we call it up.
Just waiting on it. Here it is. Okay.
The first sheet you may have to go to.
I think we can do that.
So they're not in this pack. Are they in this packet?
No, they're not.
No. Here we go. So Heather, I'm going to defer to you to walk us through each of these.
Sure. So the first 3 you see come, money is coming from the animal control officer lines, the compensation, purchase services and supplies, and going to central purchasing diesel. So what we're doing here, so if everyone may recall, at the beginning of the year, we actually did a reserve fund transfer because we transitioned from an employee in the animal control officer position who retired to a intermunicipal agreement with the town of Rutland for that service. And what ended up happening is we had to put the money into purchase services. And the way we had our budget this year, we had voted on line by line, which meant we couldn't just move the money during the year. We had to go to the reserve fund transfer to transfer in what we needed to purchase services. So this is what we have left. It's the unused money in the animal control compensation line, the purchase services line, and the supplies line. The idea here is we take this money from these 3 lines and move it over to central purchasing diesel. So I know we've put some money into central purchasing diesel. Every time we put it in, it goes back to 0. I know there's been concern, we actually increased our budget a couple meetings ago for FY '24. We are pretty comfortable with the number that's there. We do know that, with the ability of doing the bottom line, so moving within the central purchasing, we can always pull from electricity or telephone if it goes up a little bit next year or a little bit over, but we think we'll be good within the central purchasing line to cover diesel next year. Aside from, if prices double what they are now, forget it, all bets are off. But assuming minor increases and adjustments, we should be okay. So that's the first group of transfers you see right there. So $7,976.85 from ACO compensation, $1,238.86 from ACO purchase services, and $175 from animal control supplies, all going to central purchasing diesel, and then that cleans out the ACO line. Any questions on those?
Just but while we're here, I mean, that's 14,000 and change of transfer to central purchasing diesel in the last 3 months. We're still thinking that the budget number is good. That's 30% over what we estimated this year for budget, right? If our budget this year was 44, you're over by 14.
Well, we're trying to put it there to make sure we don't have to come back. We know we
Yep.
have the money there.
Yep.
We don't anticipate spending all that's there, but we want to make sure that we don't have to do more transfers throughout the rest of the season, to that line.
No, understood,
I-
but do we need to be looking at 60 for the budget for next year?
I think I think the number should get us to just about where we need to be. Like I mentioned earlier, with the central purchasing being a bottom line, we can pull from other lines if we need to.
Okay.
Where they don't go up as high, right? So, otherwise, I think we've cultivated that number as best we're going to with the extent of what we have for the budget this year.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on those three? Mark?
Yeah, I just want to go back to Jeremy's point of the math. We've budgeted 42,000 for FY '23.
Yeah,
Originally, we budgeted 44 for FY '24. We increased it by 5 to 49. And by my calculations, we're at 55 for FY '23. So you're saying hopefully the prices won't go up, but my point is if all things remain the same, it doesn't look like we have enough budgeted in FY '24.
I don't have much to add to that, right? So, we're at this point in the budget season where I think we already added $5,000 to it. FY '23, we had a budget of 42,000. We're now at 49,000, right? So it's already 7,000 more than what it was in FY '23 actuals of what we budgeted. So we already put more into it. I know we've done a couple transfers for that already. This is way more than we're gonna need in a diesel. Like I mentioned, we just don't wanna have to come back and ask again. And it's a little bit cleaner just to move the money into the diesel so it's there in case we need it. Again, I hope we don't need it, but as much as I'd like to predict the market and what we're doing and where we're going and how much we get hit by storms and everything, I can't. I can tell you we'll watch it and we'll do the best we can to make sure we manage within those numbers.
I think the price for diesel, just general, and at least in this state, is trending down. It hasn't really, diesel a year ago was about the same as diesel now with a slight increase over the winter, as it always does. But I think those $6.50 a gallon spikes are gone. I think today you were hovering somewhere around $4.35. Okay, yeah, the prices hopefully won't go back up like they did.
So is it the wish of the group to do this in bite sizes and vote on the first three that we've just spoken about individually now? Or would the group prefer to vote on the block of the 32,839?
I'd be fine going through them all and just doing one vote.
Okay,
Yeah,
We're
go
gonna go
through them all and
through
do one vote,
Yeah.
sure.
good enough?
All right.
All right, Heather?
So next we have building commissioner compensation, 2,000. So Donna and I sat down, and we also sat down with Cheryl to figure out what our building commissioner was getting per pay cycle, the number of pay cycles left. We have a little over 4. Figured out what we needed left, and then there was a couple $1,000s left in that line. The plumbing inspector compensation is down to $375 before this most recent payroll. If he has to do a number of inspections, or if any of the inspections start picking up for the rest of the cycle, we're gonna be out of money. So we wanted to transfer that over. The 2,000 is gonna be more than what we need, but that way we don't have to come back in case we're, cutting the guests too close. So, and that number I cleared with Cheryl as to what her guess was. And that still leaves a couple extra $1,000 in the building commissioner compensation, even if he continues to make the same amount of money each cycle as what he's been averaging. So, any questions on that? Okay, so then we have central purchasing telephone. So remember, the central purchasing pieces next year all grouped together. Central purchasing telephone, we'll have about $4,000 left by the time we're done the last two bills of the year. And as you all know, our central purchasing heating oil numbers are pretty low. So we're gonna have a couple more bills at least, or at least one more big bill on that for the cycle. We wanna put enough money in that so we don't have to come back to the finance committee and the select board for the season. So that is why the transfer for $4,000. Any questions on that? Heating oil last year was 49.4 for actual, and this year we budgeted 55.3. In case anyone has questions on that. Any questions? Okay. All right, so the next two, municipal IT systems, or our IT line, right, MIS. We have compensation, then an encumbrance, so we had money that we had previously put aside, I believe, for a computer for me, that we ended up going different direction this year, and not using that. So we have those two pieces, and we want to move it to the purchase services line. So if you remember, similar to the ACO, we had a transition. It was much later in the year, but we went from having an employee to having a company doing our computer systems for us. And as a result, we had to move money, well, we haven't moved money, but we needed money in the purchase services line to use. We did have enough to get us through that. That purchase services line includes both our monthly subscriptions, right? So Office 365, Sophos, our firewall, all those pieces, as well as the cost for them to assist us with 24 hours a month of remote service. Putting this in gets us a little bit more money in the purchase services line. It's getting pretty low. We also did have to do a reimbursable grant that we paid for initially out of this for about $2,000, which was our phishing campaign through Maya. So that money will come back hopefully before the end of June 30th to add to that. But in the meantime, we just want to make sure we have enough to be able to pay the last 2 months of the consultants, the company we use, right, our 24 hours retainer. And then we also need to have a little bit extra in case, God forbid, something happens and we need them to come out on site. So that is what those transfers are, and those are $7,183.06 from compensation and $1,804.10 from encumbrance.
Excuse me.
Any questions on those? Okay. And then the last one, public building custodian. So if you remember in the FY24 budget, we have proposed a building custodian where we actually increased the amount of money in it. We put money from our building as well as public safety complex, so we can get one person for about 18 hours a week for custodian/maintenance. This year, we had budgeted for a person, but we never ended up hiring for that person. We continued with the service that we currently had, and the service was paid out of the purchase services line. So we need to move what's left in the custodian line over to the purchase services line. In addition to paying for that company out purchase services, we also use purchase services to do our maintenance and repairs for our buildings, right? So like right now, we've been holding off on getting the plumber in there because we have a leaking sink. We've been holding off on fixing, the slate roof over at the records building until the end of the year, and we had enough money to do it. So that's the importance of that last one, and that's in the amount of $8,461.41. Any questions on that?
I have a question.
Yes.
Heather, the request forms
Yep.
that I'm gonna be required to sign,
Yes.
the request form shows a balance of 8461 and a transfer amount of 10,400. So what I have on the form
For the
is like-
public,
So it could be the schedule's right and the form's wrong, or vice versa.
I think the schedule's right. If you want to just pencil out that 10,000, right, 8,461.41, because I pulled my numbers, I believe, off of the most
Okay.
recent report
Okay.
when I typed it up yesterday. And then if I'm wrong, I'll come back, but
Yep. Okay. So that wouldn't change the number of 32,839.28.
not according to Excel.
Right. So is there a motion to accept these transfers as presented on the schedule?
I'll make a motion to accept these 8 transfers for a total of $32,839.28.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. The transfer motion carries. Thank you. So that was the easy part. The other part is Heather and I, 13 emails today alone, are trying to back and forth between whether or not we should do the warrant articles or the budget, and we've decided, well, we're gonna do them both, because one overlaps the other. I will give you a starting point before we begin, and that is that I'm gonna hold this up, which is gonna be very familiar to the members. You recall that we had one of those slides seemingly every meeting all during March and April. And I presented a single page of this same thing, summary, when we had the joint meeting of the Finance Committee and the Select Board. And basically, we were at a deficit at that time, at that meeting, of $140,000. And you recall that there was a motion at that particular meeting, or a general sense anyways, that we would go to the Select Board and ask $20,000 from the ARPA fund, and hopefully something would come across our table from the Wachusett Regional School District, and then the residue would be in the form of stabilization. There was also a Delta jump ball in terms of this being our first year where we were doing a little bit of the budget the old FinCom way versus Heather introducing a new way. Then hopefully this evening and this year we'll end doing it 2 ways. Reminds me of 2 sets of books, and it never quite works well. And as it turns out, we had about a delta of about $17,000. And Heather and all the good staff at Town Hall and myself with a tiny bit of a contribution, we narrowed that down, and as you might suspect, it kind of split the difference. So the difference was only $8,000 when we finally got done. So the long and short of it is, the deficit to start the discussion tonight was $130,442. At that particular joint meeting of the Select Board, where there was the discussion after an ask for $20,000, the Select Board, in their, I think, generous wisdom and in good faith, offered to contribute $30,000 of ARPA funds to our particular deficit, which brought it down to $102,442, with still the stabilization and still the Wachusett Regional School District in play. Don't want to take away from the discussion that evening of the ARPA funds, but what they basically did was took $30,000 out of ARPA funds, offset the DPW building, department budget for stormwater, for the lack of a better word. We had about 36 budgeted in that particular account. ARPA is now subsidizing 30 of that, so that left a balance of only 6. And that gave us a good starting point of $130,000. Not a good starting point because it was still a deficit. And that brought it down to 102. Last night, the select board, and by the way, at that particular meeting that the select board was good enough and generous enough to give the budget cost $30,000, I had asked for 20, and I tried to re-up and ask for 50, but it didn't sell, so we ended up staying with 30, which is still 10,000 more than we had thought, so that's good news. Last evening, at the select board meeting, they volunteered with, I don't think any urging or encouragement from any of us that were in attendance to forego their committee salary of about $6,200. So that reduced the deficit even further to, I'm rounding to about $96,000. Keeping in mind that we're getting closer to zero, and at one time, there was a $250,000 override on the table, and at another time, there was as much as $150,000 from stabilization on the table, and now we're down to about $96,000, still not having heard from the Wachusett Regional School District. So if Santa Claus shows up in May for us, that number could be 0, it could be 32,000, and it could be 10% of 700,000. We don't know. And that's the living, breathing document of the budget that we're working with right now. But the good news is, worst case, stabilization will only be hit by about $96,000. So I think that's a good story. So many schedules that could have said that and shown that, and we decided to just say that. So hopefully everybody to point 0. With that, I think what we'd like to do is just to give further groundwork, as you can see up on the screen right now, there's a revenue calculation sheet, which is, leading us to what our deficit is and what our budget is, and that leads us to some of the warrant articles.
So
you-
Mark, just so everyone here knows, it's also in your packet. So about halfway through your packet, if you get to the section, I think at the end of the warrants, it goes through the bylaws, and then it will be like a blank page, and it will say FY '24 budget detail. It's the next sheet. In case anyone didn't bring the binoculars.
So, given the fact that, I'm not joking in terms of the email exchange that has occurred the last 2 days, near the bottom of the page, stabilization at 102 or 96?
96 is today's,
Okay,
with the
Right.
6,114 from Select Board
Right.
and 115
Right.
from FinCom.
so I'm working from the one before the select board making that committee salary recommendation a year ago. I would speak to the point, and then I'll leave it alone forever, for another whole year, but at the top of the page, you see new growth at $75,000. We waved the white flag and we left it at that. And then if you look in the third cluster of groupings of numbers here, you'll see building permits. Can you just scroll down a little bit? At 25,000, down from a year ago. This is our last time to say, those two things go hand in hand, the lack of new growth and the lack of building permits taken out. And hopefully that's something that the Economic Development Committee, in tandem with the Finance Committee and the Select Board, will turn around and improve. And once again, idea of that credit goes to Seth, and let's hope that it gives us good good results, because both of those numbers have got to be bigger, and one could drive the other two being bigger. And also would be remiss if we scroll down to the last tranche there. The ambulance is listed at 400,000. Many of us in the room tried to get it off 300,000 for a long time. It moved to 310 a year ago. Originally, it was at 340, and the ask was made to bring it up to 400,000, and there it is. So all of that, the ambulance fund, the departments, the select board, I think everybody chipped in to whittle our, if you recall, $444,000 deficit only about a short month ago. So that's where we are on the revenue side of things. If you look at the next schedule, which I think is also in your packet, it's a budget summary. And again, I apologize for two things. One is I don't have my glasses, and two is I'm working with yesterday's particular report. But you can see here, there's all manner of comparisons between the final column, which is the reconciliation that Town Hall and Heather and her staff and my, to a tiny extent, have now all reconciled. There's a detail of each one of these budgets in your packet as well, but that's anywhere from 13 to 26 pages, so this one page right here is telling us kind of where we are, and if you scroll at the bottom, you'll see that there's a 0 at the bottom, which is essentially is our difference in our balanced budget. So, but that includes having to go to stabilization for $96,000, which could change with some good news from the Wachusett Regional School District. And Heather and I spoke today, and she sent off I'll let you speak to that point, Heather, but sent off a request saying, what's up, what do you got, who's on first, how much we looking at?
Yeah, sure. So at the last meeting we had with the superintendent and the finance manager over there, Michelle, with the regional town managers and TAs, a couple weeks ago, they had mentioned that they would really like to see a joint letter coming from the communities asking that they release either the E&D or some of the additional revenues coming in from the cherry sheet back to the towns to reduce the assessments and also talk about the impacts. I lazily waited for a week and a half to see if anyone was gonna run with that. Seeing no one was running with that, I reached out to everyone today and was like, hey, anyone interested in doing this? They all were, so I drafted a letter, sent it out to them. I'm hoping by tomorrow we will have a personalized section for each of the towns, so we can send it off to the superintendent and he can present it to the school committee. But essentially, it's requesting the E&D, or at least a portion of it, come back to the towns. Their E&D got certified today. The amount was, I think, $1,475,000 or something of the tune of that. I think they were originally thinking it was closer to 700 to a million.
It was
So-
double, right.
Double.
So it came in much higher. And then the regional school transportation line for the cherry sheet number is higher than the governor's number. The question is now where it's gonna land, right? The House came in almost $700,000 higher than the governor's number. Funding it at 100%. The Senate Ways and Means today came in at 200,000 less than that, so 500,000. So there's a good possibility it's still gonna end up somewhere between, 500 and 700,000 more than the governor's, hopefully. So that's more money to them that they didn't initially count on. So the request of the letter is actually for them to release a portion, if not all of both. Back to the assessments, we talk about a hardship fact we have to pull from operating stabilization, fact that this puts us further behind for next year, and that we're partners with the school and we all need to work together.
So in summation, we're at a balanced budget of 0, using 96 some odd $1,000 of stabilization, which will not go higher, but may go lower, depending upon what comes across the table with Wachusett Regional School District. So I think a good result, in particular considering where we were 6 weeks ago. So I would think that there's, and maybe we hold off until we do the warrants, but at some point, what we need to do is to vote to approve those particular budgets. I'm gonna spare
It should be
everybody.
a warrant, it's further down the warrant.
Yeah, I think if we can say that the vote on the warrant is gonna circle back to acceptance here, I'm gonna spare everybody flipping the workbook and going 52 cost centers one by one and approving them. So, good result, and I think a good starting point for the warrant articles right now. Is that about sum it up? Heather, do you want to speak to your memo, or do you want to start with the warrant articles?
We can do whatever you'd like to do. I can speak to the memo, because I think it just kind of outlines a little bit. So last night, the select board met, and they're meeting again on Friday to officially potentially open the warrant, to do any changes. They wanted to put it on officially as a item to actually open the warrant, reconsideration of anything, and then close it again. So there's two things on there to consider. The one that's of substantial importance is the capital article, the one pertaining to the
Do
Mack
you want me to put up
truck.
the memo?
I thought you just had the memo up.
I don't think that was the memo.
Oh, you know
Was it?
what? It
Yeah,
may
it
not
was.
have been. It looks
Okay.
looks a lot like it.
Yeah, that's
There
it.
you go.
This is it.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've been looking at these
Yeah,
documents
no,
all
no
day. They
problem.
look the same to me. So, anyway, so the first article on the warrant is $280,000 for the replacement of 1989 Mack truck for a override, debt exclusion override, right? And in doing so, you also have to remember, and Mark brought this up, I think, earlier, it comes with two additional costs. One is $4,000 for borrowing, and one is $5,693 for the town election, because it would have to be a special town election for those two costs. So the importance of that first article is, in the event that the select board ends up removing it from the warrant, we're gonna wanna go back and amend our budget, right? To reduce our budget by those two amounts, so that we're always, only pulling as much from operating stabilization as we absolutely have to. That being said, if the select board goes forward on Friday and they say, for whatever reason, we're gonna leave it exactly as it is, we're not gonna change it, then we would have a motion ready to go, a town meeting floor, in the event it doesn't pass. A town meeting floor that would substitute the two articles, one being the budget article to adjust the numbers by going down, and number two being the school article to reduce the operating stabilization. So it all depends on what card happens where, but we'll always have that backup card ready to go if we need it. The memo, so two things. So the first is that it kind of gets us to where we were as of last night. So as Mark mentioned earlier, the select board waived their committee member salaries for next year. And in talking to Mark, he had reminded me that I needed to adjust the FinCom budget to reduce it down to just that 170 for the annual dues for the finance committee.
For meeting attendance. The
Meeting
dues, the
attendance.
dues remains, the meeting attendance and supplies came out.
Yes, so it reduces by $115. So you'll see up there the very first two things under what I call baseline budget adjustments is those two adjustments, right? $6,114 and $115 totaling $6,229. So what you saw so far when Jeremy pulled up the budget and what you have in your packets before you reflects just that. All
So-
right?
So Heather, for those
Yes.
that may be watching and chuckling about the $115, I think it's important to note that's 45% of our budget that we cut out, so.
I was just gonna point out that if I didn't do the 6,114, I probably wouldn't have gone back to do the 115. So, all right, so that updates the budget numbers for you, and it reflects the article as follows. So what you currently have in your packet in the warrant articles before you is the numbers as they currently stand today. These are not the numbers you see on this sheet. The sheet you see here is in the event No, there you go, okay, thank you. So, yep, so that's the Mack truck article. So if you scroll down to, I think it's around Article 15, Jeremy?
Yep.
And I've already stand corrected, yep. So that article there, so the total of 7,649,907, can you go back to my memo? That should be the same for that first one. Yep.
Yep.
So that is the those are the articles as they stand today with those first two adjustments, the 6114 and the 115. That doesn't touch the Mack truck, so that leaves the Mack truck in the budget. If you scroll down on my memo, Jeremy, thank you. I call this, if Article 1 Mack truck is removed, then we have two corrections to make. As I mentioned, the election budget gets reduced by $5,963, and the borrowing for the debt gets reduced by $4,000, which is a total of $9,963. And if that were to happen, then the substitute to warrant articles, which, you know, would be ready to go and converted over to motions if they needed to be just in case, are down below, totaling the same numbers, but less by $9,963. So you see the warrant article for the town budget is $9,963 less, and the amount of operating stabilization utilized goes down to, on the last article, Jeremy, $86,250 from the original $96,000 that we're using as of today. So the reason I show you those is just so you guys can, everyone can see and understand what could happen on Friday if the select board makes a change to the warrant to reduce the numbers. That is what would end up happening. That being said, everyone has in their packet, like I said, the first two articles, and all articles as are, but they are adjusted so that they include the 6,114 reduced and the 115 reduced. So if nothing changes, what you have here is the highest the numbers will be.
Correct. So in brief summation, depending upon the votes on the articles, the $96,000 that we would have to go to stabilization could be reduced by 10 grand, which would leave 86,000 still waiting for what the Wachusett Regional School District might come across. So that number keeps getting more favorable. At one particular time, maybe a month ago, we were at 150. So again, trending in the right direction, but we need to make some determinations and take some votes on some warrant articles. So the warrant articles that you have here, I think the best thing, so that we don't confuse everybody, is to take them in order,
Sure.
with one exception. I want to take Article 1 after Article 2 and 3. So if I can speak to Article 1, 2, and 3, those are articles that were put forward by the Capital Improvements Planning Committee. Article 2, as you see here, is for a ditcher head attachment for the tune of $14,150, which is a small amount that is going to work wonders and speak volumes for assisting the DPW department in their stormwater efforts. And you may recall that the DPW superintendent spoke to that point, and I think everybody all along has spoken favorably of that. Capital Improvements Planning Committee asked that it be recommended that it be taken out of capital depreciation funds, which would be at zero cost to the taxpayers. That particular fund has $70,000 in it. A year ago, $46,000 was taken out for two similar initiatives. The argument is that the fund should probably have a level of about $500,000, so whether or not it has $70,000 or $52,000, because the other article is taking out a little bit more as well. We, Capital Improvement Planning Committee, voted in favor of that, and you can see that the Select Board voted in favor of it. So I think we should do these one by one as opposed to doing all of them and coming back. So my suggestion is there a motion for approval of a recommendation, that is, for Article 2, either as approval, disapproval, or take no action?
I'd make a motion to recommend approval.
for Article 2.
Motion made to recommend approval. Is there a second? Second? Any discussion?
Just the point is, it sounds like it'll save the town a lot of money in the end to make these two purchases so that we can do a lot of the work on our own versus contracting it out to others.
It's a perfect purchase. Well said.
He says that ditching attachment will save him a person. It just, he doesn't have to have someone sitting there like two, instead of having a 3-guy crew, he can have a 1-guy crew. So it seems like a good buy.
So, end of discussion. Vote on the motion. All in favor of approval?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. Motion passes as approved. Article number 3, same thing. Made a recommendation that we put this zero-turn mower forward. You may ask, well, I thought the criteria was $10,000. Actually, the full amount of this particular purchase is around 12 or 13,000. Capital Improvement Depreciation, Capital Improvement Planning Committee made a recommendation to have DPW reach out to the Cemetery Commission and the Recreation Commission because the mower is not just mowing the common, it's mowing those areas, and they willingly came back and each said, we'll take a third each. So this is a third, same thing, recommend capital depreciation at no cost to the taxpayer, and a badly needed piece of equipment as well. And you can see the select board move for approval, and the Capital Improvements Planning Committee recommended approval. So is there a recommendation for approval, disapproval, or take no action on this item?
I'll make a motion to recommend Finance Committee approval for Article number 3 on the warrant.
Motion made, is there a second?
Second.
Second? Any discussion? Hearing none. Vote to approve Article 3, recommend approval for Article 3. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. The motion to recommend approval carries. I'm not sure I'm going to make my way all through all 15 of these, so Heather, I may defer to you on a couple, but let me take this Article 1. This might strike you as a little bit odd, because you can see on the motion already that the Select Board has recommended approval. The Capital Improvement Planning Committee, however, has recommended disapproval. And the background behind that is that we put the replacement for this particular truck forward, but we made no financial recommendation, waiting for the Select Board to come back to us in terms of what their recommendation was, and then we would take a vote on recommendation. What we have decided since that came back, and we met last Wednesday, and we met as recently as 6 o'clock this evening, is to stand firm on our disapproval and to reissue our committee report in the form of an amended committee report to withdraw this article for consideration. And we submitted that amended committee report to the Select Board in draft form with a 3-page memo in terms of what the reasons were. And the reasons were that this particular article, unlike 2 and 3, will have a cost to the taxpayers. And what came back to us was, in our view, too expensive, or more expensive than we had anticipated. And we didn't think that this was the year to have an 2.5 override to add to the already 2.5 increase the taxpayers are going to have to absorb. This would be additional taxes. We didn't think it was the right time for that. The second or third item that came into play to us changing and amending our report is that the percentages that we were quoted at 4% and 5% just struck us as being overly favorable. And in the event that the funding couldn't be realized at 4 and 5%, with all of what's going on in the economy and the Federal Reserve, the risk would be that the amount that would be added to the taxpayer would be even higher than the number that we didn't like. Number 3 is that this would add additional debt, and in short order, there is debt relative to DPW that's coming off the books. So the argument was, rather than adding more debt, why don't we time it properly, because some debt's coming off the books in 2024 or the beginning of '25. Why not replace this particular freight liner with new debt when other existing debt comes off the books? Fifth item is that this freight liner would not be received until 2025 or 2026, and there is one, a freight liner, a new one that was voted on in 2022 that DPW will take delivery of in a month. So it wasn't as if we were shortchanging them by deferring this, because there's another one en route to DPW right now, and that would replace a particular vehicle in their fleet, so that we wouldn't putting them in an untenable situation. And the last items were that in order to approve this article, we need a special town election, because it can't be done because the election just took place this Monday. So that special town election would be at a cost of $6,000. The financing would be at a cost to put the financial package together, not the financing of it. $4,000, as Heather alluded to earlier, that's a $10,000 savings in a year that we made cuts a lot smaller than $10,000, and it just spoke to us that while the vehicle is worthy of replacement at some particular point, Capital Improvement Planning Committee went on record as saying, we believe that, we think that, we support that, but not this year. And that's why we have disapproval. So it is a little confusing, and it's a little mixed when you have Select Board approval and Capital Improvement Planning Committee disapproval, but those were our reasons behind putting the vehicle forward and then amending our report because of the financing and the cost and the like. So that's where we're at. So that needs a discussion, and I'm happy to reverse order and have discussion of it first and then motions, or however you'd like to play.
I have a question for the town administrator. Just, you may know, you may not, the truck that's being, gonna be delivered in the next 4 to 6 to 8 weeks. Right now, the way I look at it, say, so Travis has a fleet of, excuse me, X number of trucks that can plow. He said this one here is a wing plow with a salter sander on the back capabilities. Does the new truck being delivered, is it the same size as this one?
I don't think it's the same size as the Mack truck. Carol, the one there 2 years on back order, it's not the same size as the 1989 Mack truck. This is an '04, right?
I have no idea. They've got a similar price.
Yeah, and I don't want to say authoritatively, but I believe it is.
Yeah, I don't think it's similar price.
Because the one in
I wasn't
delivery is to
involved, so-
replace a Mack truck, and this article right here is to replace
Because,
a Mack truck.
again, this is thinking, not from as much of a finance standpoint, but think, if he's got a fleet now of 4 big trucks, he can put the wing plow on and the salter. If this fails, he doesn't, go down to 3. If he's getting one that can we can limp along for, okay.
Is this truck still usable, or it's
Yes.
still in service right now?
He said, the discussion, at the meeting last night, Travis did speak and said, yes, there is considerable, it's old, it's getting rusted, frame-wise. May need to look at if there was something that happened to it, it would cost an estimated, this is his words, $40,000 for repairs, but it is still on the road.
Keeping in mind that this particular truck wouldn't remedy the one that we have if it fell into disrepair, because we're not taking delivery of this for 3 years. So our point was, why not hit the pause button, take a look at it next year, maybe supply chain, maybe delivery, maybe rates, maybe lots of things would be more conducive. We were sold on the need, but not on the timing or the financing.
Do you know if they've looked at maybe slightly used options that may be cheaper, or is that not something?
Yeah, and that's an interesting point, because as you would hope, the CIPC committee asks all those very same tough questions, and the argument was, no one's gonna hold a used piece of equipment till your town decides what they're gonna do, because you could decide not to do it, and we've missed the sale. However, in sharing the bad news, or the results of what the not DPW, but CIPC did, Travis said, we'll take another look at it, and maybe the market improves, and maybe the prices will be better, and maybe, with no guarantees, but, and we want them to do that, and we want them to bring it back next year. So. Any other discussion? Is there a motion to approve, disapprove, or take no action?
I'm gonna go ahead and make a motion to disapprove the Article 1 from the Finance Committee based on what we just heard, finance-wise.
Second?
There's a motion made and a second to disapprove. Any discussion? All in favor to disapprove?
Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? Abstentions? None? The motion to recommend disapproval passes. Heather, can I turn it to you to
Sure.
grab a couple of these? We're on Article 4.
Sure. Happy to do it. All right, so the next one here, so the next two have to do with the Water Enterprise Fund. The first one is the Water Enterprise Fund's budget. So Water Enterprise kind of voted just like our general fund budget is all by itself, because it's outside the general fund. And what we have here is compensation, expenses, and debt, so it lists out for you the expected expenses for each of them. 240,433, expenses 720,225, debt 96,198, total 1,056,856, and to be offset by departmental receipts of the same amount. So this is just the regular annual article every year. It just, the numbers change based on what the totals are. They even presented their budget to FinCom this year so that any questions could come up, could be discussed. Does anyone have any questions for me on this? Okay.
So if I can just add, if
Sure.
the receipts are higher, they keep it, and the expenses are higher, they incur it.
Yeah, so it goes into, so we have in the general fund what's called free cash. They have what's called retained earnings.
Right.
So there's a little bit different. But the concept of enterprise funds, right, is it's supposed to be self-sufficient. So enough money comes in, and if enough money doesn't come in, then they have to raise the rates to be able to have enough money to come in to be able to cover the costs. So it shouldn't be, they shouldn't be relying on the general fund to cover the cost of what they need to operate.
Is there a motion to recommend approval, disapproval, or take no action?
Make a motion to recommend approval of Finance Committee for the Water Enterprise, the Water Department receipts, Article 4.
Motion made,
Second.
second? Any discussion? All in favor to recommend approval, say aye.
Aye?
Opposed? None? Abstentions? None? Motion to recommend approval passes.
Okay, so this next article is again Water Enterprise. It's for the water tank maintenance. This is the 5th year of the existing contract in the amount of $107,189. Again, this is paid out of the Water Enterprise budget. And they're gonna pay from retained earnings, so that's what we just talked about, their free cash.
There's a motion to recommend approval, disapproval, or take no action.
Recommend approval.
Recommend approval. Is there a second?
Second?
Second. Any discussion? All in favor to recommend approval, say aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. Motion to recommend approval passes.
All right, so Article 7 and 8 are related to each other, or
Six.
Article 6 and 7, sorry. So appropriate funds to road improvement and then to use those funds. So every year, when you looked at the revenue sheet itself, it actually shows at the very top that we pull in addition to our taxes, 118,870 for next year. So a number of years ago, and Harold, do you remember how long ago it was that you guys accepted? Oh, a while.
About 6 or 7.
Okay, so over a handful of years ago, the town of Paxton accepted the ability to tax people each year additional money to raise road improvement capital stabilization fund. So the money comes in, just like with the debt exclusion or anything else, right? This is every year. This amount of money increases each year automatically by 2.5%. So every year you get taxed 2.5% more, or the town as a whole is able to collect 2.5% more on this number. So Article 6 is saying again that the town meeting still thinks this is a good idea and improves the ability to raise the money. And Article 7 says, now that you've raised the money, you can spend the money. And what we spend the money on is road work. So usually it goes directly to paving and so forth. Questions?
No.
Okay.
So recommendation for approval, disapproval, or take no action?
Recommend approval?
Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. Motion to recommend approval passes.
I already covered, you didn't do both of them together,
Six.
did you?
Oh,
Did you just do 6 or 6 and 7? I
we
thought you
do
just
6
did
or 6 and
6.
7?
Yeah, we did 6 and 7.
Oh, you did both.
Yep.
I'm sorry. I was
Yeah.
asleep at the wheel.
Yep. So we're on 8.
We're moving faster than a town meeting in this.
Yeah, there you go. Chapter
Motion
9.
to adjourn.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Article 8, Chapter 90, authorization. So this is a standard language article that's pretty much on every town meeting's warrant. What it is, it's allowing the town to accept the funds coming in from the state for Chapter 90. Chapter 90 is the state allocated money that comes in to repair the roads. And this is just allowing us to sign off and accept those funds.
So a recommendation for approval, disapproval, or take no action?
I recommend approval.
Recommend approval has been made.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of recommending approval, say aye.
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 Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. Motion to recommend approval passes.
All right, so 9 and 10 are related both to the revolving fund. So Article 9, right now, I have a recommendation to the select board actually to remove this article on Friday. This was we already have a revolving fund bylaw. It was put together around 2017 with the requirement of the Municipal Modernization Act to effectively put all revolving funds into an actual bylaw, says who can expend them, what can you use them for, et cetera, et cetera. So the idea was to amend the bylaw to be able to add electrical and plumbing permit fees. I'm still in discussion with legal and DOR on how best to do it and what the language is and so forth. So this is not ready yet. So as such, my recommendation is to skip over or to remove off the warrant altogether, Article 9. That leading us right over to Article 10, right? So Article 10 is something you're going to see every single year as long as we have revolving funds. This is something that we're required to vote on an annual basis at town meeting. You guys have had a little bit more practice with this than some other FinComs because we had the issue last year and again this year with recreation where we needed to increase the number of the amount they can expend because they were so good that they were just pulling in higher profiting programs with some newer things happening than they had in the past. So we had to increase the numbers and the limits. And that's what that is, the maximum expenditure. That says the amount of money they can spend out of these funds, the highest level. So they could collect 300,000, but they can only expend 250,000. Revolving funds, for anyone who may not remember, they roll year to year. So they always stay in that specific account. They don't come back to the general fund unless they're closed out for good, and they roll for those purposes. You have here Council on Aging 10,000, Recreation, we bumped it up to 250 because we just want to make sure we cover ourselves and they have enough for their operations. Library, we actually reduced from 5,000 to 2,000 because we looked at a 5-year history and we weren't even close. So we didn't want to put too high of a number. We want to be as close as we can to being accurate. Paxton days, we've left at 5,000. And then the electrical inspector and gas plumbing inspector, that's still there, but those will be modified with the deletion of Article 9. So if Article 9 gets deleted, then those two will go away. If not, I believe at a very minimum, the select board will most likely grant me the ability to amend Article 10, at least on town meeting floor, to reduce those two pieces. Because if you're gonna pass over Article 9, then electrical and plumbing are irrelevant, because they don't exist.
So do you recommend that we
Hold this one.
hold
too.
this and say, we'll make a recommendation at town meeting?
I mean, you can,
Because you can't really,
that's fine.
Article 10, you can't say, yeah, we recommend 4 out of the 6 with the others, I mean,
No, I think that's perfectly fine.
To hold it, or to?
I think it's fine to
piecemeal
hold
vote
it.
on
well, we can make recommendations at town meeting.
Yeah, we can.
You can do that, or you can make, you know,
Because we're
it's
not gonna
probably
meet
easier
again
than
before you print
cleaning. Yeah.
the warrant.
Correct.
Right?
Heather, can I just add something
Sure.
to the recreation?
Yeah.
Because this group knows very well. For the longest time, their expenditure level was 120,000. And I think for FY '23 and FY '22, we increased it to 200,000. The extra 50 is one of the capital improvement initiatives that they put forward. They're gonna put in a well in their ball fields, and they're paying for it entirely themselves at no cost to the taxpayers. And that's why it wasn't a warrant article, but I think that's the other $50,000 bump there. So,
And I know this committee still has yet, I don't think it's made it to the agenda, but we do need to get FinCom to vote on increasing their expenditure for FY '23 that we're in. Because I think we have I think Larissa might have sent you an email, Mark.
she did.
I think the current limit is like 210 or 220. It was already higher than last year, but we're getting close. We're only about 5,000 off.
And unfortunately, with email overload, I wasn't able to respond to that, but I thought we voted on that.
I think we voted for the prior year.
And I thought you came back about a month later when we voted on the current year. I'll look into
Okay.
that, but,
And it's possible, I might not have that in my notes.
no.
Or I might have had so many meetings that it just kind of merged.
So if we didn't vote, which I believe we did, but if we didn't, what's that gonna do to the recreation over the next 2 to 3 weeks if we haven't voted on it?
It just means we'd have to have a meeting just so you guys can extend the amount before they go over.
You could do that on Zoom.
Yeah, okay.
Just give us a number and we can do that.
I'll check the minutes, I'm almost positive, because I think
Okay.
we joked about, you're only here 3 weeks ago, and we asked, what about next year? And everyone said, wait, and here you are for next year. I'm 90% sure we already voted on it,
Okay.
but I don't, and if we haven't, we will.
Okay,
So,
that seems fair.
11,
So the proper course on these would just be to hold.
Yeah.
Well, we can't hold. If you hold, then it's gonna say nothing at,
It will just say what it used to say in the past, which
make
is.
recommendation
Yeah.
at town meeting?
Yeah.
Okay, oh, that's fine, okay, we don't, so we
When
don't.
you say hold, that's what it means to me.
Perfect, thank you.
right, that's what I thought it meant.
Is that okay with everybody?
Do we need to
Makes
make a
recommendation at
motion
town meeting?
to?
Well, I don't,
I don't think we need to.
I don't
Yeah,
think so.
okay.
Okay. All right, 11, Wachusett Greenways. So this is an annual article. This is a regional project for the Wachusett Greenways that we always put money in. 8-town collaborative. They always ask for $1,000. This year, they actually asked for an increase for the first time in a while of $1,100.
Motion to approve, disapprove, or take no action?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion's been made, seconded, any discussion? None, all in favor to recommend approval, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None? Abstentions? None? Motion to recommend approval passes.
Okay. So now we're getting into bylaw land. So with the bylaws, what we have here is at the end of your packet, so you'll get to the signature page, and then the next page will be a table of contents, and then you'll go into each of the bylaws. And the reason I do that, it kind of cleans up the warrant a little bit, puts all that bulky stuff at the end, and so people can easily find it. So I worked with legal to make sure the language is there. So what happens, so the first one is on page 16 of your packet, it's Article 12, it's for the alcoholic beverages. So if you remember any of the select board meetings, they've had an extensive discussion about their desire to be able to actually permit alcohol on town property. And how you do that is you allow them to issue a permit to do so. So it takes the current bylaw that we have and amends it as follows, that the select board may authorize the sale, possession, consumption of alcoholic beverages on any public property from a duly licensed vendor for special events or limited periods of time. So they would have to, under chapter 138, issue a one-day liquor license to someone to be able to do that, so it's still within the discretion of the select board.
How much?
Back in, what's
How
that?
much?
How much for the,
Yeah, what are we charging?
for the permit fee?
Yeah.
We just added a permit fee to one day, do
think
you
it was
remember,
100.
Carol, we just did one day.
50 or 100?
100.
I'm guessing 25, but might be wrong.
I-
Might be
Okay.
wrong.
It was either 25 or 50, something like that. But it would allow, so like if, let's say the library wants to do a paint and sip, right? They might be able to, they could ask at least the select board for that
Or-
opportunity.
Or if you wanted to have a beer truck at Paxton Day, or at the J Summer Jam.
Yes.
Cool, okay.
So, and it doesn't mean the select board would say yes, but it gives them the opportunity too. So the original version of the bylaw that was written in like the 1970s was fine. It allowed it under Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 138, alcoholic beverages, right? You could get a one-day license. We amended it in 1991 and got rid of that provision.
So you couldn't have alcohol on town land, period, right?
So,
Okay.
and this cleans that up and makes it so that you can. So, any questions on that? Okay.
Motion to recommend approval, disapproval, or take no action?
Move for approval.
Approval? Is there a second? Any discussion?
I think this is a good suggestion to bring to the Economic Development Committee as far as like what are the
We'll
rates?
take any way to generate any revenue that we can. I mean, again, you think, what does it lead to, 4 or 5 years down the road? What happens if you had some, if, say, the summer concert series or Paxton Days, you could have like vendors and food truck fairs and stuff like that? That's awesome. Yeah, it's a good idea.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor to recommend approval?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. Motion to recommend approval passes.
Okay, so the next one is page 17. This is to add a brand-new bylaw. So in conversations with Travis at the DPW, he had a request this year that we consider putting in a winter parking ban bylaw. So this again went through legal counsel. The recommendations have a very specific date on it from November 15th to April 15th, so it's very clear. It's also the same date as you can't dig. So it's, for those in that world, those dates stick out. It does talk right here, any vehicle other than the one acting in an emergency, parked day or night on any street in town that so may interfere with the work of removing or plowing snow, removing ice, sanding the street, may be removed or towed away under the authority, discretion, and direction of the chief of police or their designee. The registered owner of the motor vehicle which is removed pursuant to this bylaw shall be fully responsible for all charges and expenses incurred for the removal and storage of said motor vehicle. So if Mark parks his car where he knows he's not supposed to park his car, and it's in between those dates, and it gets relocated, he will have to go find the location of it and the funds available to be able to get his car back. This does help out quite a bit. We, don't run into issues all the time, but I think it is nice because it sets a very clear expectation for our residents of what we're looking for to be able to keep the roads clear and safe for them. Any questions?
So it is based on the contingency that that vehicle would be interfering with snow, ice, or sanding.
Yes, so if
So-
it's November 30th and the sun is shining, it's 82 degrees, unless we have a freak hail storm,
You don't have to worry about it.
it's not interfering.
Okay. Thank you.
But there was a lot of debate on this one about what language to put in, including whether or not it should be from first snowstorm or ice fall. But the concern with that is it's very subjective, right? And our geography for the town's not the same. So Jeremy could have ice at his house, Mark could have nothing. And so when does it trigger? So this is a lot less subjective, it's more very clear, it sets the expectation, and then it's just involved with educating people.
Does this need to include what the fees and,
No, because we're not finding them, we're just having Mr. Tow Truck Company come and remove it, and you're gonna pay the tow truck company for whatever cost they incur.
Is that, so that's a fee that just from them, like how? So it
Yeah,
could be-
we're not charging any fines for it
Okay.
at this time, or at least not in this bylaw.
Okay.
One more question.
Sure.
Is there, are you gonna put notices on like the town website or something as far as like winter parking ban is in effect?
Yeah, we're gonna have to do a bunch of education. I mean, right now, what pretty much happens is every time there's a snowstorm, they put out a notice that, you know, people shouldn't park on the roads and the streets and reverse 911 and so
Yeah.
forth. So we'll just do, you know, it's gonna be the first year. I don't think we'll run into a lot of issues. It's mostly just educating people and saying, hey, we have the authority to do this. Please don't have us do this.
Yeah.
Just move your car.
Thank you.
And usually the police have been really good in the past where they'll go and say, hey, Seth, move your car.
Is there a motion to recommend approval, disapproval, or take no action?
Approval.
Second.
Motion's been made, seconded, any discussion? All in favor to recommend approval, aye?
Aye.
aye,
Opposed? None? Abstentions? None? Motion to recommend approval passes.
I think we have to discuss this one.
Article 14's marks.
Wait a minute, we have a marching band that's coming in a minute.
Motion to recommend approval.
Second.
Any discussion, please, none? So is there, motion's been made to recommend approval of Article 14, the Finance Committee bylaws redo. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. Motion to recommend approval passes. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, so Article 15 is the town budget. So as we mentioned earlier tonight when we went through the memo, this is the highest this number will be. It could potentially go down on Friday by the amount of, what, $9,963. So the two definite numbers here are going to be the EMS receipts account, right, the 400,000, as well as the 564,511 from free cash. Those two numbers in the article aren't going to change. The numbers that are going to change is the top one, which is the difference between the total of that 964,511 and that top number compared to that bottom 7,649,907. So if you guys vote tonight that this is the top end of where the budget is and it ends up being less than that, I think we're still covered. And when you go to look at the final warrant, if you start panicking and you're like, oh my gosh, this is about $10,000 off, it's because if the select board passes over that Mack truck, they will likely reduce the other two articles. Any questions? Mark?
What's your recommendation, that we vote this evening?
It's up to FinCom what you guys want to do. I mean, if you vote, you could vote and say that, you know, recommends that this total budget line does not exceed X dollars. You could be more specific and say, recommend that this budget line includes the 400,000, the 564,511, it does not exceed 7,649,907. Or you could do what you've done earlier and hold on it and recommend on the floor, because this article theoretically, depending on how Friday goes, could change. It's not gonna go up, but it could go down.
My point is not whether it's approved, disapproved, or held for further discussion. I think we should vote on it this evening. Because it's not going to go any higher. I don't know if we add a qualification that voting on it as it reads, with a potential reduction, or just vote on it as it is, and if we have to re-vote on it at the annual town meeting, we'll do that.
Would we re-vote on it if it was reduced, though? I mean, if this is what we worked so hard to get, and it's only gonna get better if
Right.
Article 1 is removed, I think it would be safe to say if we approve it as is, we would certainly approve it
Right.
if it was reduced.
I'm fine with.
That's just
vote-
that's my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I'm fine with voting as it
Yeah.
reads.
And just make sure everyone knows what they're voting on. So if you flip to the next page, Jeremy, if you could. So you're voting on, remember we talked about the departmental bottom line budget,
Yep.
right? So cemetery commission, 6,650. You're voting on non-excluded debt principal, 88,200. So although you have all the details in the back of every single line item, you're voting on these bottom line pieces at town meeting as part of this article.
Two departments of which could change.
Two departments of which could change, they
The
could go down.
elections and the short-term borrowing.
Yep.
I'm still okay with voting
Yeah.
it as it is.
Yeah.
So is there a motion for approval, disapproval, or take no action on item Article 15?
Motion for approval.
Second.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor to recommend approval?
Aye?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. Motion to recommend approval, Article 15 passes.
Okay, so Article 16 is the school budget. So the number here that's, well, actually, I take it back. Any of these numbers are subject to change in this one. So the current maximum number that you're gonna have is 7,477,530. In the event that the school reduces their budget, then that number will go down, right? That 96,213 you see in the middle, that up top in the paragraph, that is our operating stabilization amount. So if the school reduces their number, that number goes down. If the select board votes to get rid of Article 1, the Mack truck, then that number is gonna go down to 86,000 and some change, right? The difference of $9,963. So again, this is the highest this package will be. Just to explain again, so the bottom number, the 7,477,530, also in the paragraph, that's the total number. And then it's offset by the operating stabilization, and the rest is just a regular, raising through our revenues and appropriations. So, and the reason we tied the operating stabilization to the school specifically is because we knew it was the highest variable to change, so it was, made the most sense to be able to use the Play-Doh in one section as opposed to having to move it in multiple places. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions?
So Heather, the question that I have is that this particular Wachusett Regional School District, as reflected here, is in at 4.19%. And the town administrators sent a letter a long time ago that the poor choice of words, but the line in the sand was 4%. And there was some argument that it should be 3%. And there are people out in the community that think it should be 2.5%. But I think we were generous in saying 4%. And the school committee ignored that request by the town administrators. And I'm being generous when I say they ignored it, but they ignored it, and they came in at 4.19.
For us, other people had different assessments, right?
Right, all of which were above 4% though, so you raise a good point. So my concern is that if we vote approval of it, then what incentive is there for the school committee or the district itself to come back and take some relief off of our stabilization fund? Because by them not adhering to our fair and reasonable request of 4%, we're having to hit our stabilization fund to subsidize that. Now, there's two sides, if I can continue. One is, there's a compelling need for millions of dollars to go to the school district because the superintendent made a very compelling argument that we need more money. There's another side of the coin that I've advocated for a long time is the school committee fell asleep for 3 years, and this is the result of it right now, and a fair, legitimate request to honor a 4% threshold got ignored. So I'm conflicted in terms of which side of those that I'm going to land. You can be for education, but against the budget. But I've added a different degree where I don't think that the school committee and the subcommittees that caused this have done anything other, I'm hesitating to say this, but turn their nose up at the towns by not responding to a fair request. Now, the other side of that is 2 towns have already voted for their particular budget, which was not at 4%. So that plays a little bit into my my vote that I'm going to cast in a minute. But I'm not lying to you. I'm bothered by no movement, no reaction, no response, and I don't mean the town administrators. Their hands are tied by what the school committee is not doing or letting them do. I've said a million times, we're blessed to have both of them, the superintendent and the business manager, but I don't think we're blessed by having the school committee fall asleep for 3 years in a row. And I've seen it firsthand at the audit advisory meetings. Totally preventable, shameful, dereliction of responsibility. And there it is right there on our article. So
So
I'll stop there.
you've already said, Mark, so 2 towns have voted. I think Holden's vote is on the 15th. We vote next, and then the last vote is Princeton. Princeton's is the 20th of June. So I think what Michelle and Jim had said previously was that in the event that any of the first 4 towns vote no, they're going to end up kind of relying on a 1/12 budget because June 20th is really late in the cycle to rely on it. But it also might potentially get them to think about, do they go back and reconsider the numbers? Now, we're hoping that just sending a letter and saying, hey, the superintendent and the administrative folks have already been, very forthcoming with saying that they wanted to give back E&D to the towns. We'd like to see that come back to the towns. So hopefully they'll take that as an assessment. But I know that didn't help your decision-making for tonight, but I just wanted to make sure everyone had the same info.
Your letter that you addressed with the other town administrators, was that to administration or to the school committee?
That'll go to the superintendent. He'll share it with the school committee.
Because again, I appreciate that he wants to give the money back. He's not the one controlling the purse strings. And again, it does kind of bother me a little bit that if we just say, hey, we're okay with that, as a school committee, you're gonna be like, we're not gonna, we have no desire to even think about divvying up the $1.4 million that they just came across with the E&D today.
Well,
That's big for us to get, to get something back. And, $50,000 would be fantastic. Anything to reduce that 96 to 213.
and I think, the other thing to keep in mind too is there's nothing that says that the FinCom can't write a letter from the FinCom
Nope.
perspective,
Sure.
right? Or you can even work with other FinComs
Yep.
and try to do a joint letter to give more support to that piece. And you can also go to the school committee meeting and express that as a resident of town, right? So I can't do any more meetings, but, if someone else is interested in doing another meeting.
Any other discussion? Is there a motion to recommend approval, disapproval, or take no action?
I would recommend disapproval at this point,
You recommend,
disapproval. I mean, full disclosure, I have a kid in the school, I'm all for education, but again, like, we've done so much work just as a volunteer FinCom here. I would like to see the school committee do as much work to try to get their budget balanced like, like requested.
And especially now that we know, I mean, I was glad we got a number today. That's a big number. It's twice what they thought it was gonna be coming back to them. I mean, yeah, I agree with Seth. I think that we rush to meet as many times as we need to get these in here. Is the school committee gonna, say, hey, we need to get together in a couple of days to decide how we're gonna try to make right with the towns that said they couldn't handle more than a 4% increase? I don't, I'd like to see it. I don't know if we're gonna see it, so. I'll second Seth's motion.
Motion's been made, second. Any discussion? So we're going to vote on recommending disapproval of Article 16, the Wachusett Regional School District budget. All in favor of recommending disapproval?
Aye.
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 Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. The motion to recommend disapproval passes.
All right, so the last one is Bay Path, and that is for $498,964. Let me try that again. Scott has indicated that I turned myself off. The last one is Bay Path for $8,964, and that is for the Bay Path Regional Technical High School budget.
Is there a motion to recommend approval, disapproval, take no action?
I motion to recommend approval for this one.
Motion
Second.
for recommend approval.
Second.
Second. Discussion. All in favor to recommend approval of Bay Path budget, say aye.
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 Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. Motion to recommend approval passes. I think we are done. If you look at item 6, it says, time permitting. It also should read, body language permitting. So I'm gonna take a pause on that. That can wait for another day, another time, another meeting. Before we have any other motions, this group should be complimented on the hard work, the dedication, the hours. Jennifer and I have been at the table here a long time. I don't think we've ever put in this many hours and ever confronted this big a nut of 444,000 to get it down to 96,000 and falling, with some a vote perhaps by the select board on Friday, and good luck with the Wachusett Regional School District. We could be rated ground zero, which is terrific. So you're all to be thanked and complimented. And the public, who unfortunately is not here tonight, I think we did the right thing. We allowed them to speak when they were here, contemporaneous with the topic. I think they liked that, and I think they contributed a lot to that. And they're to be thanked for helping us to get where we are. So thank everyone. Is there any other business for the order, for the good of the order?
Mark, just for the purposes of department heads, if there's a future date for a meeting or even a Zoom meeting, so I can tell people when their next cycle for any transfers would be in.
You get us the transfers, we'll call a meeting.
Okay.
I think last year, towards the end of the year, we did it like weekly as it was needed. With a Zoom, if we need just 5 of us, we can do it in like 10 minutes.
I'm gonna try to get people to, I've already planted the seeds so people can start thinking about, if they know something that's gonna go over, they need to take care of it now. But sorry, even with ours from our office, we're trying to make sure we don't have to come back on certain lines.
And before we adjourn, Heather, thank you and everybody at Town Hall for your good work. Carol, thank you for being at every one of these meetings as Select Board Liaison. We appreciate it.
Thank you for all your hard work. You're right what you say. I've never seen you put as much effort in as you have this year, so thank you so much.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
This is the most reaction we got all evening. All in favor to adjourn?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. We stand adjourned.
Good
Thank
night.
you.